Hey everyone, it's Brandon Lee, host of the podcast Escaping Rock Bottom. I have an amazing, inspirational guest for you today. His story is so inspiring. As a matter of fact, we actually had his story on the news not too long ago. One of our sports reporters, Mark McClune, did this story on Matt, and I turned to Mark and I said, I need to talk to him. His story is so inspiring, and I'm so happy that he's agreed to share his experience, strength, and hope with all of you. Matt, man, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Brad.
Yeah, it was so cool when Mark did that story with you, and we aired it on CBS 5. I got goosebumps listening to that story because it was my story.
Right.
And I just related so much, and I'm like, man, I got to have him on the podcast because there's so many of my viewers and listeners who will just draw so much inspiration from you.
Cool.
So I started this way all the time. Take me back to your childhood. Where were you born and raised?
All right, I can handle that one. I was born in Portland, but pretty much raised in Arizona. I grew up here in Arcadia, right in front of Arcadia. Went to Brophy High School, and then graduated from Brophy. Ended up going to Santa Clara University, where I played baseball, and came back here and started my adult life.
That's crazy. First off, it's rare to meet a native. I don't meet too many natives, in Arizona. So that's really cool. You were an athlete. What was that like?
Yeah. So my nickname growing up, ironically, was Sports Miller. That's all I did was play sports. Since I was a little kid, I had a ball in my hand, and when I had free time, I'd go throw the ball against the wall, and that was just my deal. I played all three sports at Brophy. I was our running back, our shortstop, and our point guard. So I was kind of a jock, but I was always a philosophical jock. I think I was different than everyone. And I don't know if you even know this, I had a really bad car accident my sophomore year that probably like planted a seed for what was about to come, which we'll talk about today, I know. But yeah, I'll tell you about that. I had a kind of a life-altering story my sophomore year in high school as well that altered my sports career. But
so I played. I was definitely an athlete too. I played club soccer, and then eventually, as a teenager, had the chance to go to Europe and play for a few months overseas, and was really kind of that. I learned at a young age. I don't know if you can relate to this, but I learned at a young age, Matt, that as long as I did really well in school, and especially on the athletic field, I could pretty much do whatever I wanted to. Like, my parents were like, as long as you do well in sports and school, like, yeah, we don't care we're not even going to ask what you're doing on the weekends.
Right.
So I learned at like a very young age, okay, work hard, play hard, right? Like, if I do well at work, school, and athletics, then you could play hard. And I learned that at a young age.
Right. I could see that. My parents were more, it was like that, but my parents were more ignorant. Like, we never talked about it. Just wasn't talked about in our house. But my sister paved the road. She was a screw up 5 years ahead of me, and so because of her, I could pretty much do whatever I want to do. But you're right, sports kind of gave them the other avenue to look the other way. But what introduced me and what got me going was being so close to Mexico, to be honest with you. We went down there a lot in high school, and
I went to Tijuana all the time.
Oh, you did?
Oh yeah, in Rosarito.
That's a healthy place to go as a drug addict. That's a great place to go. Great idea.
But we did as teenagers, like in high school, because I grew up in Orange County, California. So it was about a 2-hour drive down to Mexico. We'd go to Rosarito all the time, and like Senor Frogs. And
it was just the normal thing to do, though.
It was totally normal. And that's the other thing that I tell people too. I'm like, at age 15, I started to become a cocaine addict, but all my friends were doing it. So if all my friends are doing it, they're just mirroring back that what I'm doing is okay. Right. So when everybody else around you is doing the same thing, you don't think that you're doing anything out of the norm or that there's anything wrong.
For sure.
For sure. So when did like the wheels for Matt kind of start to go off?
Great question. So I moved back here. I was living in Austin, Texas, and in Austin, my addiction, pain meds were my main thing, and it was still the solution. It was still working. I could get by. I definitely would have my week without my script where I'd go into issues, but I got by. I did my master's degree, ran 8 marathons on all this stuff. So like, I was okay. I definitely was an addict though, for sure. I moved back here, and to get right to the point, I brought a woman home who pulled out a meth pipe, and Yeah, I smoked that, and a year and a half later, I had lost everything. That's what brought me to my knees. I'll just be like real direct. It was one drug, and I was a guy too. Just a preface to finish about my youth. Like, I didn't have coffee really until I was out of college. Like, I messed around like we all did, taking a pill here or there in Mexico. But like, I was a healthy kid that cared about that stuff and thought I would never ever get off the rail. Like, to me, it was unfathomable, like how someone could do that to their life, let alone that's exactly what I'll end up doing.
That experience. So I was a big ecstasy user as a teenager. I got to New York, and I actually did a drug called GHB.
Done that.
Yeah,
Sure.
that was my drug of choice for 10 years. I didn't do anything else but GHB for a decade, until I was at a bathhouse in Los Angeles, and a guy opened up his backpack and pulled out a meth pipe. And I'd seen people do it before, but something always in my spirit, like something around me was like, don't do that, for a decade.
Yeah.
But at that moment, I was so high on GHB, my inhibitions were lowered, and he pulled it out, and I was like, okay. And they're in a bathhouse. There's mirrors everywhere.
Right.
So,
Right.
like, I saw myself do it, and when I write about it in my book, and I always say that I inhaled the devil that night.
Yeah.
I was looking in the mirror and legit like saw the darkness in my eyes, but like, here's the scary thing: I saw that darkness. And I loved it. Like, I saw that dark come over me, and I'm like, it's game on. Let's go.
Really?
And so I just felt like superhuman in that moment. And it was a dark feeling.
Yeah.
But I had so much trauma as a child and so much darkness and anger inside of me that it was a perfect match for me. And it was game on.
I get that. I totally get that. Yeah, I totally get it. And it introduced me to the whole sex thing, which we kind of talked about earlier. I would go to bed at night, and I thought I would hear the devil running across my roof. And that drug truly is the devil. I don't want to just beat up that drug, but that's where it went downhill though.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I was such a sex addict, and I was just like, that's what that drug did. I just would go chase. It was so dark that the depths of it, I tried to get HIV. I was driving to Palm Springs, going to these pause parties is what they call them in the gay community, and like try to get it, because to me, the reason why I wanted it was so that I didn't care anymore. Like, I didn't have to worry about getting that HIV test every Tuesday after a long party weekend. Did I get it this weekend? Did I not? And I'm like, just fucking give it to me, and then I don't have to worry about it anymore. Like, that's where that drug took me. That's the level of desperation and hopelessness that I had. It was like, yeah, give me a virus that we have no cure to.
Dude, I was right with you. I didn't care at all. So I mean, and I don't care talking about it. I mean, I'm straight, and what that drug does to you, it makes you so sexually, as like your inhibitions are so out of whack that you're doing things you can't believe you're doing. And the option or the possibility of me getting HIV was there all the time, and I didn't give a shit.
You don't care.
It's just crazy. And people don't understand the power of that drug, and what there's a whole community of people that are out there doing this
right now,
that bounce around from couch to couch, whoever. And I was that guy who had money and a free couch. And once they torch me, they go to the next group. And then I become one of those people who bounces around.
Yeah, couch surfing.
That's the cycle.
It's what we do. And what I think I want people to take away, from your story is that it doesn't take long for that drug to ruin your life.
Right.
Like, to take everything you've earned, to take everything away from you, your house, your car, your job, your savings, everything can be wiped away within a matter of months or a year. And that's all it takes.
Right. Yeah. Like in Brandon too, my experience was like the unmanageability part. People think as a drug addict, your life is unmanageable. And I would always be like, well, shit, your life would be unmanageable too if you're doing meth. But if I'm sober, I'll be fine. But then when you take away the drugs for those few days we don't have them, I realize like, I'm totally unmanageable. And that's where it becomes terrifying, where you forget how to handle your emotions. You don't know how to handle fear. You don't know how to handle pressure at work. And those are things like as an addict that people that aren't addicts can't grasp. They can't understand. And, they think it's a moral decision of us just making this poor decision. And it's not. It's a survival.
That's the whole
terrifying survival. And I know all the science behind it. I think scientifically, like, that's actually correct, right?
Yeah. So because when an addict continues to use, it's because, they're triggered by some traumatic event or an unhealed traumatic event in their childhood. Right. So if you have a bad situation with your boss, let's say you have a really bad argument with your boss, or something goes bad at work, you don't make your sales or whatever, we immediately go back to that little child in survival mode. And the only way we know to survive is to numb. And that's our escape. Right. Like, that's our only option that we see, right? So something traumatic happens in our adult life, it triggers us because we have so much unhealed trauma from our past.
Right.
And so any little thing that throws us off, where do we immediately go? Drugs are my solution.
Right.
Drugs will numb me, take me away from this.
Sure.
And that's why I can now speak about, I know this for fact because up until January, the year of 2020, I was just like violently shaking every night in my bed. Yeah. And I couldn't get past it. You
were doing that still, like even being the anchor on TV and doing all this stuff?
Yeah, this last year. Every night I would come home for 4 hours, just violently shake at night.
That's incredible.
At that point, I had not truly healed from my childhood trauma. I had been in AA for 8 years, 5 meetings a week. I'd done everything, and I was still violently shaking. And so what I've done now, and to the point, was thinking about taking my life because I didn't see a way out. Because how could I have so much time in recovery and still be suffering and still have this violent shaking? Right. That's when I started to, start working with a shaman, do spiritual aspect, and really go back and try to heal from those traumas. And that's why I tell people, if you heal from the trauma, you can really find true long-term recovery.
Right. That's right.
Because you won't have the need, to go into survival.
Yeah, and a lot of people just don't know those. Some people don't even know what their traumas are. You know, when you peel that onion back, I'm a big believer too that you got to have, like, the pull of your future has to be greater than the pull of your past. And for me, I think that I'm kind of bouncing all over. That was a really tough thing, though. Coming into recovery I feel like I have a really good story to share, and I can help a lot of people. I need to pay bills, though, and I'm in finance, so I got that. But like, how do I bring this all together? How do I find somebody to make this useful? Right. And for me, finding purpose was really tough, and I think that was also part of my demise. Why I used was. There was always this gap between what Matt was and what Matt should be. I always wanted to be I always wanted to be this person that would be in front of people, that, would have like a leadership role that people might listen to. And how ironic, like, that's exactly what I fucking got. And I denied it. I hated it because it wasn't on a baseball field. It wasn't the way I envisioned it, I didn't envision it with no fingers or toes. And, but anyways, I'm all over. But that's acceptance. Like, as soon as I accepted this door was there. All I had to do was walk through it. And
I love that you brought up even that idea of purpose, because I tell people all the time when I speak at treatment centers, and you're talking to people who are at their rawest, right? They're in treatment. They're in their first 30 days.
They're malleable.
Right. And every time I always tell them this: listen, if you find your purpose in life, you will find true efficacy. You will stay sober. You have to be able to find your purpose in life. If you find your purpose, you find value in yourself and a reason as to, I'm here on earth for something. Right. And if you find that, you let that fuel you.
I think it's like double important for us addicts, because I just feel like in general, we're very emotional. Yeah. We're emotional people that have, I think most of us would rather have a job that's got purpose and sit in a cube and be a billionaire. Like
100%.
There needs to be more there.
It has to be. So take me back to what kind of, even in your adult life, like, how did you lose, your fingers and things? Like, what was that? What happened?
So
here you are, an athlete, and that's really important for people to understand. You're a killer athlete. You play baseball. And then all of a sudden you get an injury. Yeah,
my identity was an athlete. You're right. And all through college, all I really cared about, though, was being the best athlete on the field. I didn't care about being the best player. I wanted to be the best athlete, and I never thought it would really end. And I just say that because now that I look back, I realize how much I took it granted. But when I came back here from college, I had this realization of, I'm not walking on a baseball field anymore. I'm walking into a cubicle. And it was very different. That idea of purpose was gone. Yeah. And suddenly I didn't have clarity, it was. So anyhow, I was contemplating life, questioning life, got invited to go on this trip with my father. We had a great, my dad's my best friend. We've gone to Alaska every summer since I was a kid. We do amazing things. And he invited me to go on this mountain climbing trip, and I said, yeah. And to make a real long story short, we were at 18,000 feet, and he slipped and fell. I dove for him. I remember grabbing his jacket, and it ripped me down, and we slid down the face of this glacier with intermittent rocks and chunks of ice, and we fell over a mile, if you can believe that. Came still. My nose was off. My ear was dangling. My ribs were all broken. I was a mess, and my dad was about 15 feet to the right of me. His bone's sticking out of his leg, and he's moaning. And I could tell, though, by the way he looked at me, that it was not good. And I also knew it was not good because I had to take off my gloves to peel my eye open.
Right.
My head was so swollen I couldn't see. So we ended up having to spend the night there. They couldn't get a helicopter to us, and the next morning, miraculously, this helicopter comes. American helicopter pulls us out and gets us to Mexico City, and that was like where ironically, that night on the mountain might have been the easiest night I had in the next 2 years, living in hospitals and surgeries and stuff like that. So yeah, put on morphine, 2 days after, and I think I was on morphine for 3 months straight. So the big surgeries where they amputated my hands and my fingers and my toes, saved my thumbs, which was life-saving. Literally, I would have had like someone living with me otherwise. Lost most of my toes, but you've seen me like that. Other than pick my nose, it's amazing what I can still do with these thumbs. I'm so blessed that they saved these, but had probably 12 surgeries, ended up getting MRSA on the last one, and almost died. So I had a PICC line from that. I had to plug in, but anyhow, I come out of that, I guess is my point, was like my state going into that life-changing climb was already one of like questioning my life and purpose. And then, as a 22-year-old too, it's like your whole life's in front of you. You feel like you're just launching. You've done all the work, and now you're just about to launch. And I wasn't ready to handle it at all. I was...
well, I think that would be so hard for anybody to handle.
Yeah, but I think I did even worse, and probably, if I can admit it, my downfall was I wasn't authentic in letting people in about the pains I was really feeling.
Yeah.
Everyone thought I was like a strong mountain climbing survivor, and the truth was I was terrified and scared and a total pussy inside, and I didn't know how to handle that.
Where do you stand with that? Where do you stand with that today? As somebody who did once have your identity as, a baseball player and an athlete, and now somebody who doesn't have all your fingers and your toes, and what is that like for you to live with today? And what is like a message that you can even kind of share with others as?
Yeah, gosh, that's a loaded question.
I ask you that because, one thing addicts are really good at is finding imperfections about ourselves and beating ourselves up over it. Right. And I always say we are our worst critics.
Right.
To the point where we begin to numb because we are so critical of self.
Sure. Well, I'll tell you what changed my philosophy, maybe.
Yeah.
Or something that I was on a business trip to Grand Rapids, my first business trip. I don't know if you heard this story. It was my first business trip with no fingers, and I'm in my suit. And the night before, I didn't sleep a minute. I'm thinking about this presentation I have to give. I was a consultant to financial advisors, so I would walk into like 4 or 5 guys with suits on, give my rap. But I couldn't sleep. I wasn't even thinking about my presentation. I was thinking, I'm going to walk in. These people it's going to be the first time I've put this hand out there. And like, are they going to shake it?
Right.
Like, what's going to happen? And I went around the room, shook everyone's hand, and it was okay. I was pouring sweat, but as we're sitting down, the CEO, guy's looking at my hand, and because Matt, I looked at your bio, and I saw you played baseball. What position did you play? And he's really he's really asking like, what the hell happened to your hands? And I go, I was a knuckleball pitcher. And I kept a straight face, and the rest of the room like erupted in laughter and started laughing. But the guy thought I was serious. But anyways, what happened though, after everyone started laughing, I told him I was full of it, of course. Yeah. But he shared with me because I lost my wife to cancer 2 years ago, and I've been going through it. And before you know it, it's 2 hours into this meeting, and like we've talked about these people know me now. They know me, and I know them, and it became clear that we all have scars. I guess
Yes.
is this idea is that we all have scars, and that was the first time I really truly felt like inherently in my heart that God had me, that I was going to be okay. Like there's others that are like me, like and this is actually a gift in sense that it like invites people to share it with others. You know, it's like you having a sign on your chest saying, you know, I'm a former meth addict. That's,
Right.
So anyhow, that's one of the beautiful things. Then you throw in my whole drug addiction, and I feel like that story is far more eclipses than what happened on that mountain, and it gives me the ability to talk to people about it. So I guess to answer your question is like, as what I'm learning is you stop worrying about like making it. And just do the things you love. And as soon as I started focusing on the things I love, which is my clarity, hence the name of my entity, the company you were referencing earlier, the clarity is like when I'm helping people, it's like I'm on the baseball field again. Like I've walked on the field. Like I could time stand still. I don't give a shit how much money I'm making. I'm in the moment. I'm present. Like I'm in flow. And that's the only way I want to live my life. And it did take me, admittedly, 42 years to finally say, like, push the money aside and, like, let's just do what I love doing. But ironically, the money's going to come when you finally start pursuing what you love. And so I had it all backwards.
So true.
I had it all backwards. And it was this big insecurity and incident that kind of, like, helped me get through it.
Yeah.
And see through it.
I think it's such a beautiful, beautiful lesson because, it took me so long. It was actually, it was a few years into recovery. I suffered from severe body dysmorphia and always saw myself as like this little skinny, scrawny kid. Even though I was good at soccer, but just still super skinny and scrawny. And then I got into the gay world and like, honestly, everybody's like jacked up on steroids and like they're all these huge muscle guys. And there's a lot of body dysmorphia in the gay community. Right. And my sponsor at the time, she's a former Marine. It was a woman. She was a former Marine and a bodybuilder. And she looked at me and she goes, listen, you got a few years under your belt. Like, what do you want to work on? And I told her, and I was like, honestly, I just want to look in the mirror and fucking be happy, like with my reflection. She goes, okay. She goes, and I admitted to her that I had done steroids for 10 years. And she looked at me and she goes, okay. She goes, in those 10 years, let me ask you this. Was there ever a point that you hit your peak? Like that you looked at yourself in the mirror and said, fuck, finally, like you look good.
Right.
And I was like, no. She goes, okay. She goes, and I was doing 3,000 calorie shakes a day. And which was insane. And she goes, and I said, I've never been happy like with the way I looked. It was never good enough. She goes, okay, now you're going to do it my way. You're never going to take another fucking steroid again. You're going to put down those goddamn 3,000 calorie shakes. You're just going to eat normal. Okay. Right. So after a year, I finally, I was up to 205 just to give people perspective. So I got it to 205. My natural weight is 157, 160. Like that's naturally like where my body just wants to be. Right. And I weigh 162, 163 today. And I looked in the mirror and finally one day it hit. Like I only tell people, I'm like, I just looked at myself one day in the mirror and I was like, holy shit. I love the way I look today. Right. And without any steroids, without any of that, and was beginning to remove all of these fake perfectionist things that I think I needed to look like in order to be part of.
Because you dealt with it finally.
Right. And I was able to like, no, I can stand in my truth. I don't need to be something else to be part of that group. If I don't fit in with that group, it's because I shouldn't be with that group.
It's hard though, because like, don't you think our society, like it gives you everything to take a shortcut?
Everything.
Like if you don't, I'll take steroid, like you said, or I'll drink an energy shot, or like there's a quick fix for everything. And then you throw in our phones. Yeah. Throw in that thing.
And we're looking at Instagram and we're looking at all these people on Instagram that are like,
everyone's perfect.
Everyone's perfect. They're chiseled. They're built.
I saw there's apps too now that like make people. Yeah. That make you look skinnier. Yeah. Have you seen that?
Yes.
Like, this is all new to me. I don't know.
And like, yeah, but people do and there's just so much mental illness that it's setting yourself up for, and it's setting yourself up for failure. Dude,
my first AA meeting I ever went to, I was in Prescott.
Yeah.
I went, it was actually an NA meeting, and I raised my hand at the end. And, they asked, does anyone need help or sponsor at some meetings? And I just started crying. And I said, I don't know where I'm at. I'm impressed. I don't know what I'm doing. but will someone come talk to me? And this guy came up to me, ended up being my first sponsor. Amazing. And Paulie goes, Matt, he looks around, he goes, you're really 3 people right now. You are who you think you are who you think people think you are, and then you are who you really fucking are. And if you keep coming to this program and you get right, all that comes to one, and all you have to worry about is just who you fucking are. And that's so true, you know. Like, I look back at me and my addiction, and I don't know if I want to call it addiction. I want to call it like unhealthy living, or like mentally. It was that there was always this gap between like this perception, this screen of me versus who I really was. And it's like the most freeing, unbelievable feeling when you can just be yourself and not give a fuck.
It is the best feeling that I've ever had.
Hard
before.
for anyone to understand, right? Who hasn't been an addict?
Because we're such a prisoner to everything.
So it's free. Yeah, it's unbelievable.
You know, and that feeling because in all honesty, a lot of us have used because we feel uncomfortable, but when we use, we feel part of. So
exactly
right. And so when you remove that stuff that made us feel part of, we're really sitting there in our shit. And like, I didn't experience some pink cloud in my first year or two. Like, I was dark.
Right.
I saw people around me having this like live awakening, and they were happy and joyous and free, and they're fucking we stopped using, and I was happy, and I'm like, I want to fucking use. Like, I was just dark. But like that feeling of, you know, for example, was bullied as a kid, because it looked like I wore eyeliner. People used to beat up me saying, oh, girly, you know, I had a high-pitched voice, which is crazy because, like, all of a sudden when I hit puberty, it dropped. So God was like, dude, we put you through enough shit. We're going to give you a deep voice.
We molded you enough
like, I had a girl voice, like, as a kid, too. And people would be like, oh, mascara boy, makeup boy, da-da-da. Well, now I got to a point, like, that I love it that it's the name of my book, because now I'm just like, yeah, what you used to bully me, what used to hurt me is now the name of my fucking book. So, you know, I'm good. And but it's this beautiful thing to finally achieve, to be able, and this is the test I tell people. I use guys that I mentor. I don't really sponsor guys in the 12-step rooms, but I mentor people. And I always tell them this. I'm like, you need to go to the bathroom and you need to do a 3-minute test and just stare at yourself for 3 minutes. And can you maintain eye contact with yourself? And do you notice yourself start to smile, like smirk or smile, or do you start to frown and go sad and lose eye contact? Because that's a real good way to kind of gauge, can I look at myself in my own true reflection? And my therapist one time, it was such an eye-opening moment. She stopped me mid-session. She goes, Brandon. She goes, let me ask you this. How do you see yourself? I'm like, what do you mean? Like, how do I see myself? She goes, and I asked her, I said, well, what do you see? So I asked my therapist, I'm like, what do you see? She goes, okay. She goes, I see an incredibly talented, gifted, beautiful soul. Someone who is empathetic, someone who's caring. And she goes, do you see that in you? I'm like, no. She goes, that's the problem. She goes, you don't see yourself the way others see you. And she goes, and people see you as a good person. People see you as a loving person with a big heart. And she goes, that's where you need to get to. And it was so interesting. I'm like, God, I never saw myself that way. I just beat myself up. I would find a flaw, fix it. Find a flaw, fix it again. I don't like the way this looks, fix it, you know? Rather than just accepting. And it leads me to this too. I used to think people would like me based on perfection. So like Facebook, social media, everything had to be perfect and curated.
It's just the opposite.
You know what's crazy? The moment I wrote my book and the moment I fucking told the world that I was a victim of child sex abuse and that I was this and I was that and this is what I did, but this is who I am now. I connect more with people after I've shown them my battle scars than anything that I thought was trying to make them like me by this life of perfection.
It's exactly right. It's exactly right, man. People, authenticity is like today's currency.
100%.
You know, everyone, I don't know, we're all looking for ways to differentiate ourselves from the business world. And I feel like you can differentiate yourself these days by just saying, please, thank yous and calling people back and being on time. Unfortunately, I hate to say that, but anyways, you're right, man.
You know, just and I look at some people in my industry, in the TV industry, and I look at them, I'm like, damn, your life I know is not that perfect. Like you and then you wonder, and then they wonder, like, why aren't I getting so much engagement? Like, why aren't I getting that kind of reception from the viewers? I'm like, hey, let people know you're struggling a little bit, right? Like, let them know, like, I'm just like you, man. Like, what you and here's the thing. This was the one comment, and I will always be grateful to this woman who sent me this Facebook message back in 2017, because that's when I came public. She goes, "It must be so nice to have the most perfect life." And I was like, "What the fuck?" I literally had that reaction. I'm like, "What?"
Right?
Like, they think my life is perfect. I'm like, yeah, because I've only ever shown them a life of perfection. And that was what set me off to be like, yo, like, this cannot be the public's perception of me, and a few, and then I did a story, an expose. It's called Shot in the Dark. And it was this harm reduction group that went out, and they would set up in parking lots, and they would give people like clean needles, tourniquets, clean cooking plates. And it was harm reduction. They were trying to get them sober, but they're like, listen, if you're going to use, let's like make sure you're using safely so you're not getting sick. When that documentary aired on 3TV, I read all the comments, and people were like, oh, they're trash, they're scum, let them fucking die. And I was like, oh my God. And I called my sponsor, and I was like, I'm going public. Like, these people need to know. The dude they tune into the news nightly used to be that meth addict. And do they think of me as a piece of trash and a piece of scum and someone who should just die? Mm-hmm. And that was what fueled me to be so public about it, to help change the perceptions of people out there, so that when they see a drug addict, they don't immediately say, oh, they're trash. I want them to think of Brandon. I want them to see me as somebody who has transformed and changed my life, and that we can be rehabilitated, and we can add to society, and we can contribute in a positive way. So I was like, I want everybody who has this perception of drug addicts to sit there the next time they meet one or see one or be introduced to one, they're like, Brandon. Right. That's it.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I think it's an opportunity to change things. And like I said earlier, I'm in wealth management, like probably the worst industry to talk to people about their money. And
it's so true.
And here I am, a drug addict. But candidly, I also think it's positive when people see, like, back to honesty, because I feel like honesty is one of the hardest things. I thought I needed to work on being honest with other people about where I've been and what I've been doing. I needed to get honest with being my, like, reality, humility of what I really was at the situation. And that's the hardest thing. And so to your point earlier about your coworkers or whoever it might be, like, they don't know it. It's like, I just kind of went blank there.
Well, they're just scared too. Like, the reason why people aren't honest is because they're scared of the reaction of others.
Well, they'd rather laugh at you and then cry at their own stuff,
So true.
But I was going to say something, Brandon, and I just went blank.
It's all good. But I know the level of, like, just, what's crazy is that people ask about my tattoos all the time. Yeah, it's an anomaly.
You should show them more. You don't show them on the.
I don't show them on the news. No,
you should,
because they're just like, no, right? Because
see, I think that's
right. The stereotype, the right stereotype of, like, fully tattooed guys. You must be a gang member. You must be a druggie. And they don't. I get it. Like, I get it. So here's the thing. So people ask me all the time, like, ask me about my tattoos, and I'm like, if you want to know the truth, the real truth, it's real dark. So here's, like, Medusa, she's got her head chopped off, decapitated, and she's crying, right? Like, I had to go real dark.
Beautiful.
So, and I tell people, I'm like, the reason what started me on the tattoo thing at the height of my addiction is because it's literally an outer barrier for you not to get to know the real me. Because I need you to think of me as tough, as hard, as someone who's not soft, as someone you can't come at and hurt me. I literally created an outer barrier, knowing that your first perception of me will be, he's a tough dude. Right?
Well, I get that completely.
Now, I'm like, somebody asked, and I'm like, if I could, I can't, so it's not even real. If I could snap my fingers and remove all my ink, I would. because that's not the same man I am today.
Right.
I don't need this outer shell to protect you from getting to know the real me.
Right.
I'm vulnerable. Like I'm so vulnerable now. As a matter of fact, one of my co-workers, this was in January when I was in a dark spot. And like, I wear my heart on my sleeve. So like, I'm not even good at faking it anymore. That was one of the beautiful things of recovery, like that whole outer shell bullshit.
You learn
I can't even build it anymore. So I don't have a poker face, and like, you can read my emotions. And she looked at me in the green room when we were getting ready to go on air. She goes, B, are you okay? Just that. I started crying in the makeup room. She goes, oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. I'm like, no, I just was bawling. I'm like, I'm not good. I'm not good. And
excuse me,
like to be able to do that and cry actually allowed me to
feel
ask
okay
for
about
help,
it.
feel okay.
Yeah, it makes everyone around you better too. You know, I think people feel like they can be more human at work. You know, I don't know where that started, but when we were younger, you know, it's business is business. That's such bullshit. Like business is 100% personal.
Yes,
it's 100% personal, and I totally I'm with you, man. I think we have to, like, it'll change naturally through time because I think this generation will leave, but we have to talk about this stuff more openly and share with people, because I know for a fact, as do you, there are so many people out there that are showing up to work every day that have this prison hell going on, and they're afraid to talk to people about it. And like, I have picked up my toe in the bathtub and thrown it away. I've done some crazy sick shit through my stuff, and none of it compares to getting off pain meds or breaking an addiction, you know, breaking that mindset. Nothing. And I get real passionate about that, because like the pain I felt, if anyone feels like 1/10 of that pain, it hurts me, because it was so bad. I mean, I tear up thinking about it. I was so scared. I was so hurt. Yeah, it's crazy where I go when I start thinking about that. But that's like the kind of empathy I have for people.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe it's just because I was in a bad place. Anyway, sorry, I'm like all tearing up.
No, it's good, man. Because you used to not do that.
But like, yeah, and I get to share my story. I get asked to go share my story because I spent a night on a mountain and have this. But the truth is, I feel guilty telling this story, as to your point earlier. Like, I could go to an AA meeting and go around and hear people's stories, and every single one of them is a miracle. And it's like far surpasses the night on the mountain that I had. People are homeless. People are walking around. I mean, unbelievable stories. And they're the heroes, man. They're like everywhere. And I just get to share mine because I lost my fingers. That's not fair, you know? But eventually I saw that as an opportunity of, no, maybe this is God's way of telling you this is a good way to share that story and get people to share theirs. Because that's been my experience. I talk about drugs in the workplace or my struggles, and I'm just blatantly authentic with people. And my experience is it brings the whole team together. It makes the whole place better. It improves culture. It improves friendships. It improves everything.
And let me even say this, that clearly everybody at work knows about my story.
Yeah.
Clearly. That there have been multiple instances since 2017 when I became so open and public about it. I have helped several coworkers, not one, several, with their kids.
Right.
Get them into treatment, help them out, answer questions, help be there for them as an addict can be.
Right.
And I love that. I love that I finally opened up to be able to give help to them, you know, to be somebody in there. But here's the thing, right? Is that it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And I tell them all, you're not a bad parent. Okay.
Right.
Like, number one, you are not a bad parent. Get out of self. You're not a bad parent, and stop shaming yourself. It's not going to lead you anywhere good.
Right.
You know, but even being able to do that and being there for somebody, all because I was finally willing to be open about my story. Soon we start to realize, holy shit, it's all around us. It's like once we open up, we become a magnet. And these people are like, oh my God, I got to talk to Brandon.
Right.
You know, he'll understand. He'll be able to help. And that's why I tell my bosses all the time. I'm like, listen, my passion is storytelling. Like, I love telling people stories and putting them together and airing them. Like, I love that. I love getting to know people and sharing their stories, because people I always tell us, everybody has a story to tell. Everybody. And I'm actually doing a series on that soon. But like, And I love that. But make no mistake. And I looked at my GM, my general manager, and my bosses, and I said, but make no mistake. My purpose in life is not to show up to this studio and read a teleprompter. My passion is storytelling. That's my passion. My purpose in life is to give hope to other people out there so that they too can get sober and live an amazing life. That's my purpose. Right. All right. So don't get it twisted. Don't get it confused. News is not my purpose, you know?
Right.
And the beautiful thing about that is that when I do have a bad day at work.
Yeah, it changes everything.
Right.
There's no bad day.
Right. It's not my purpose in life.
That's right. Yeah, when you're doing the right thing, like it's you learn it's not the end that you love. It was the means. Like for me, it wasn't the game necessarily that I love. It was like the fucking hard work and showing up every day and being with my buddies in the dugout. It didn't matter if I won or lost. When I look back, it was about how hard and the effort I put in. It's like I keep using all these cliches. I'm sorry, but you know, it's like it's not the size of your garden; it's how you tend
100%
to your garden. And I learned that in recovery. I don't know about you. I went and got my forklift license when I was in recovery, first year, and worked at a ranching store. That changed my life. It reminded me of what it was like to be a servant. But you know, all I had to do was show up and be the best forklifter. You know, that's all I had to be. I don't know if that's a word, but that's the way life is. Like no matter what you're doing, as soon as I started to make it a challenge to be the best forklifter, it made my day good. Like it doesn't matter what you're doing as long as it's what you put in it. And I never would have learned that if I was still dabbling with drugs.
Yeah. So what's as we kind of begin to close here, and I ask everybody, you know, this question is how do we begin to kind of end the stigma around mental health? And what are your thoughts on how we do that?
I feel like a great way to do that is in the corporate world. Don't you? I feel I know a lot of friends who own companies, and I know for a fact if I put together some program and said you have employees that have employers need to look at this as a value to their employees.
Yes.
And especially in today's age, I feel like these millennials, they bounce around from job to job. It's hard to develop a culture, but it's in the corporate world where the stigma exists, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's where it needs to go. And I think a lot of firms are starting to catch up onto this. Insurance companies are starting to do some preventive insurance and educate. But yeah, I mean, and Brandon, how I got left Austin, I became open about my struggles. I was married, going through a tough time, and started to struggle with the pain meds again. I went to our HR director, who I thought was a friend, and told her all this stuff. And she was the one who came to me and asked me to leave.
Oh my God.
But I mean, rightfully so. She actually was being a friend. I look back, but my point is I didn't feel comfortable talking about it.
Right.
And I don't think they do. Like HR doesn't know how to handle it either. And drug addiction has nothing to do with the moral character or the talents. In fact, I would say for some strange reason, it attacks the most talented, skilled
it does.
people.
I tell people all the time, addicts are some of the most brilliant minds,
absolutely
creative minds out there. We just have to help them remove the drugs and alcohol from them and watch them go. Because I'm telling you, I believe we end the stigma by ending anonymity. If everyone who had struggled with drugs or alcohol and they're on the other side of it comes out and says, I get it, I used to be there, we will soon realize CEOs, top attorneys, news anchors, really successful, kind of brilliant-minded, creative people are recovered addicts. Right. And the moment society begins to see these really successful people and know their history and their past is how we end the stigma of, oh, you're a drug addict, you're a shitty person, you're not smart, you're a waste of space, you're not going to be any, that's immediately where society goes. Right. But I've been in rooms, I've been in meetings, pharmacists, doctors, all these people are suffering mental health or have suffered mental health.
Right.
And you're absolutely right. The corporate world is where a lot of that stigma still lives and still burns. I hope that, but I look at a place like Arizona's Family where I work, right? And they brought me back after I wrote my book.
I think you're a more valuable asset.
Right. They look at me and they know everything. My bosses have read my book. Like, they know all the dirty stuff I used to do and like how I used to live. And I'm their main anchor.
People, like, I think the people that you want to associate with, the right people in life anyways, like, they get it. That was drugs. That wasn't Brandon. And the truth is, anyone who's lived life, anyone who's past the age 40 has some kind of scar by now, I would think. For sure. And it's funny as you get older how your mindset changes about how you view things like this. Notwithstanding the fact that we were addicts, but yeah, you just realize it's not as pretty and shiny as Facebook presents, right? Yeah, for sure. But I think to your point though, like, we just have a duty. We need some men and women that are influential in our communities to be vocal about what they went through in their addiction and show people that it's,
there's some people, and I know the stigma exists for this reason. As we close, I have some really successful friends who are recovered addicts, and I've asked them to do the podcast, and they won't. Yeah. They're like, I'm sorry, B, like, I can't do it. Because the stigma exists. Yeah. Because the stigma exists. And I look at them and I'm like, man, you can help so many people. Right. And they're like, I know, but I sponsor guys. I'm like, outside of the rooms, like, you could really have so much influence on so many people. But the stigma exists, and they still won't come clean with their story. Yeah, it's too bad. I think it's a generational thing. I do. I think people our age and younger, like, I think. Oh, for sure. I think we're. Yeah. Well, we're gonna have to. We're gonna have to, because it's affecting our whole society. Yeah, and I love that, though. That means that the work we're doing now is helping a younger generation to feel safer. Right. The whole purpose of ending the stigma is only for the sole purpose of creating a safer space for somebody to say, "Hey, listen, I'm struggling right now," without the fear of I'm going to be castigated with a scarlet letter as somebody who's an idiot or somebody who's worthless. Right. Yeah. Right. It's just creating a safe space for somebody to say, "Hey, B, I'm struggling. What can I do?" Right. Like, how did you get out of it, and what can I do? Right. I'm like, yeah, perfect. Yeah, do this, and this, and this. It's powerful. I remember when I was in that shoot, and you haven't like told anyone about it. It's so powerful. Just have one person to be able to talk to about that. And to your point, like, if we open that door and someone at work feels comfortable coming to us, then it's a win. It's what it's all about. And it doesn't seem like much, but like, being that person that's gone to someone wanting help, and like, I can't tell you, it's the most impactful, relieving. It's like holding your bath, it's like relieving yourself from going to the bathroom for the last 2 days. Like, all this weight is off your chest of just, it's so nice. Dude, I'm a testament to that. Exactly. You can make it through anything if you have someone there with you. I really believe that. Yeah. Like, if you have someone with you, you can make it through just about anything. Yeah, and there's an army of people out there who are recovered addicts that, but they won't know you exist until you ask for help. Right. But yeah, it's nothing that we ever do alone. Thank God. Right. Like, thank God. But the great thing is I will say this, is that the people in my life today are like the best normies. Like, I don't hang out with a bunch of recovered addicts. I never have. I never did when I was in the rooms. I wasn't one of those guys. I didn't go to the coffee shops and the restaurants after the meetings. Like, I didn't. But I will just say, like, the people who are in my life today, 95% of them are normies. But guess what? They're like good, solid, quality people. Right. They don't have to do what we do. No, like, they're normal. As a matter of fact, the best compliment you can ever get is like, a majority of the people in my life only have ever known me sober, because I've been sober for some time. And they tell me they ask me, they're like, are you really, like, you can't have a glass of champagne at this wedding? I'm like, no, man. Like, trust me. Like, you don't want to hang out with that Brandon. They're like, Brandon, you're like the most responsible, in control guy. Like, what? And I'm like, thank you. Like, because you would have never said that about me, 15 years ago. Right. Those words would have never been used to describe me. No, like, being given this like addiction, if you can get through it, it's the greatest gift, really, because it's like you're getting a master's degree in how to live a great life, and happiness is one of those things too. It's like, you don't know how strong you are until you're forced to find out. Sorry, I keep talking a lot. No, it's all good. But happiness is the same way. Like, dude, I don't think people realize how miserable they are. It's like, I think most people that are in recovery realize there's a level of happiness and like sincerity that they didn't know existed. So true. Before. And anyhow. Yeah. Well, look at
Thank God.
the battery's actually going to die here real quick.
Yeah,
so we're
shut
going to
up.
end that. We're gonna end the notes. I'm like looking back. There's like one bar left. Matt, thank you. Thank
Thanks
you
for
for
having
sharing
me.
the story, man. It's super inspiring,
having me.
and
Love what
we'll
you're
have to like
doing.
tag team on the motivational speaking circuit because you're awesome.
Dude, that helps
Yeah,
any way I
I'll
can.
fill you in on all that stuff. And thank you at home for watching and listening. We'll see you back here for the next episode.